Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm George William, and this channel cuts through financial and geopolitical chaos to explain what actually matters, clearly, directly, and without the usual nonsense. Subscribe and turn on notifications because what we're breaking down today exposes how modern warfare is really funded, controlled, and weaponized. And once you see it, you won't look at global power the same way again. Since the beginning of 2026, Ukraine has targeted Russia's most critical regions every day, from Crimea to Kuga, from Saratov to Samara. However, Moscow has been the center of the attacks for a week now. The capital has been plunged into its longest and darkest period of civil chaos. All of Moscow's airports are paralyzed. Millions of people are in a state of panic. Hundreds of thousands of homes are without electricity and heating. Putin planned to kneel Ukrainians to the ground with freezing cold and darkness in the new year, leaving them without energy. Almost every day in Ukraine, lives were under threat. From Kiev to Odessa, from Zaporizhia to Kharkiv, Russia caused massive destruction. The targets were not military bases. They were civilian buildings, infrastructure facilities, and power plants. Air raid sirens never stopped across Ukraine. However, Ukraine's retaliatory strikes were instantaneous. For every missile Russia fired, Ukraine sent major attack waves of thousands of drones to Moscow. Since December 30th, for a full week, the sirens in the skies over Moscow have not stopped. Not only military bases, Putin's prestige, Moscow's luxurious lifestyle, and civilian order were also targeted. Major attack waves across Russia peaked on the night of January 3rd to 4th. Ukrainian drones penetrated Russian airspace and entered the country. The center of the attack was again Moscow. The biggest shockwave caused by the attack was felt in transportation. A red alert was issued in the capital and its surroundings. Due to the swarms of UAVs appearing in the sky, Moscow's gateways to the world. Dovo, Vnukovo, and Yukovsky airports were suddenly shut down by activating the Carpet Plan, an emergency protocol. Not only in Moscow, but also in Kuga, Ryazan, and Tula. Airports were closed. In Moscow alone, 200 flights were suspended. Look at the scene inside. These images are not from a refugee camp, but from Moscow's luxury terminals. Thousands of passengers were stranded in the terminals. People are sleeping on benches and on top of their luggage. Complete chaos and panic reign at the airports. Flights are being largely canceled, delayed, and tickets refunded. This disruption occurred during one of the country's busiest periods in terms of transportation and tourism, when many Russians were on vacation and traveling domestically and abroad. The New Year and Orthodox Christmas holiday dreams of hundreds of thousands of Russians were dashed. The capital, Moscow, had not yet recovered from the shock of the attack and crisis that plunged hundreds of thousands of people into darkness during the New Year holidays. Starting on December 30th, Moscow was under heavy drone attack. Ukrainian news sources report that approximately 300 unmanned aerial vehicles were already sent to Russia that night alone. Domodedovo Airport has been closed since that day. Approximately 100,000 people in the Moscow-Podmoskovsky region were left without electricity. On the night of December 30th to 31st, a widespread power outage occurred in the Moscow region. It was reported that over 600,000 subscribers were left without electricity, and a drone threat was declared in the region. It is reported that repairs will not be completed until January 7th. Not only attacks, but also bad weather conditions paralyzed flights. Bad weather conditions caused major flight delays at Pulovo Airport in St. Petersburg and Krovo Airport in Kaliningrad. In Kaliningrad, 24 arrivals and 20 departures were delayed. At Pulovo, 49 departures and 26 arrivals were affected. The worst situation applies to Nordwind passengers. They have been unable to fly to Kaliningrad since December 29th. Over 100 people have been stranded for 3 days. They were given meal vouchers worth 500 rubles, approximately euros, and 5 hours of hotel accommodation. The Russian Defense Ministry announced that Ukraine has been targeting Moscow with drones every day since the beginning of 2026. The Russian Defense Ministry stated that as of midnight on Sunday, January 4th, Russian air defense systems had destroyed 57 of the 437 drones shot down over Russia in the Moscow region. Music. So Ukraine had paralyzed Russia with over 500 drones in a single night. This marks an escalation from previous less frequent attacks targeting the Russian capital. This chaos, which has been ongoing for nearly a week, was no ordinary retaliation. It was one of Ukraine's longest-lasting revenge attacks against Moscow to date. However, what happened in Moscow on the night of December 4th was not just a civilian shutdown. The Kubinka Air Base, home to Russia's elite Russian Knights aerobatic team, was shaken by explosions. Putin's most trusted air base and civil aviation center was simultaneously trapped. On the night of January 4th, the second and technically more destructive phase of the attack took place in the Samara region, 800 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Ukraine's long-range drones targeted Rosneft's massive Novak Kubyshev oil refinery. This was not a randomly selected fuel depot. This facility played a critical role in Russia's production of high-octane gasoline and jet fuel. When drones struck the distillation towers, the refinery's most sensitive point, more than 10 explosions lit up the night sky. Satellite data and images shared by local residents confirmed that flames were rising into the sky and that the facility's operational capacity had been completely wiped out. The diversity of targets in Ukraine's list demonstrated the strategic intelligence of the operation. Not only fuel, but also the brain of the Russian war machine was targeted. In the third and perhaps most strategic phase of the attack, drones headed for the city of Yelit in the Lipetsk region. The target was the Energia factory. This factory produced batteries and power units for unmanned aerial vehicles, which were of vital importance to the Russian army. Everything from the radios of Russian soldiers on the front lines to the batteries of reconnaissance drones was produced here. With the factory's destruction, the technological backbone of Russian logistics was crushed at the very point where it produced its own weapons. The black smoke rising from the factory signaled a rupture in Russia's military supply chain that would take months to repair. On the southern flank of the map, a fatal blow was dealt to the Russian economy. The Tamanfaz oil terminal in the Krasnodar region, one of the Black Sea's most critical energy export points, was targeted by Ukraine's long-range missiles and drones. Satellite images confirm that the pipelines leading to the terminal's docks were completely burned and rendered unusable. This is not a simple fire. Russia's oil exports via the Black Sea are currently halted. This ring of fire stretched all the way to Tatarstan, 200 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. When the oil transfer depot in the town of Almatsk, which was said to be out of their reach, was hit, the geographical boundaries of the war collapsed for the Russian people. Meanwhile, the firestorm also spread to the Kuta region. The Ludanovo oil depot in this region, considered Moscow's logistical gateway, was engulfed in flames at midnight. Like the refinery in Samara and the battery factory in Yelit, this was also a critical hub supplying the Russian army. Energy lines were severed, fuel stocks were blown up, and when the wave of attacks reached Kursk, the impact spread to civilian infrastructure. The attack on the Kamutuvka power plant, though geographically small, had a massive impact. 115 settlements were plunged into pitch darkness. Water pumps in the region stopped. Communication networks were cut off, and local authorities were left completely helpless. You don't need to be a military expert to summarize the picture created by these attacks. No energy, no batteries, no logistics. While the Russian war machine is trying to send ammunition and soldiers to the front, it is strangled under the rubble of its own infrastructure at home. The shutdown of the Tamanfaz terminal in Krasnodar is not just a loss of prestige for Russia, but a direct cut in cash flow. The attack in Tatarstan, meanwhile, had an icebreaker effect on Russian industry. The bombing of a center 200 kilometers deep, such as Almatsk, has caused insurance companies to refuse to insure factories in Russia's interior or to raise premiums to astronomical levels. For investors and factory managers, there is no longer a safe production base in Russia. Add to this the loss of the battery factory in Yelit and the fuel depot in Kuga, and the domino effect reaches the front line. While fuel tankers wait empty in Ludanovo, tanks at the front remain immobile. Modern warfare is built on batteries and energy storage systems. Russian soldiers' night vision goggles, radios, laser rangefinders, and most importantly, FPV drones run on batteries. The shutdown or damage to the energy factory's production line will create an energy shortage at the front line. This disruption in the logistics chain could leave Russian soldiers blind and deaf on the battlefield within weeks. This is a perfect example of Ukraine's asymmetric production paralysis strategy. Instead of targeting the soldier on the front line, eliminate the vehicle that enables him to fight. The economic cost of Moscow airport's closing is measured in billions of rubles. Each shutdown of Domovo and Vnukovo means massive losses for airlines, fuel waste, and delays in cargo transportation. More importantly, however, this situation destroys Russia's image as a safe trading port. Moscow is now a risk zone for foreign business people, diplomats, and cargo companies. Furthermore, the air defense dilemma created by these attacks forces the Russian general staff into an impossible choice. Where will Putin deploy his limited air defense systems? If he pulls them back to protect Moscow and the refineries, troops on the Ukrainian front and Crimea will be left unprotected. If he keeps them at the front, Russia's industrial and energy infrastructure will continue to be blasted by Ukrainian drones as it was tonight. And the most insidious effect, fear of inflation and shortages. Every refinery taken offline represents lost revenue. Russia is the world's second largest oil exporter. Its budget is essentially a hydrocarbon budget. Oil and gas taxes are literally financing this war. When a refinery is damaged, it doesn't just stop producing gasoline or diesel for domestic use. It halts the production of valuable export products. Industry estimates suggest the attacks have destroyed over 10% of Russia's total refining capacity. This translates to billions of dollars in lost export revenue. This money was earmarked for bullets, missiles, and soldiers' pay. It is a direct drawdown from the Kremlin's war account. Second, and perhaps more critically, there is the internal impact. Russia is a vast country, and the logistics of its military presence in Ukraine are insatiable. It runs on diesel, trucks supplying frontline units, tanks in combat, generators powering command posts, all are thirsty for fuel. By attacking refineries and depots, Ukraine is not only damaging Russia's export wallet, it is targeting the fuel lines that feed the soldiers trying to kill them. We are already seeing reports of fuel shortages in some Russian regions, with gasoline prices rising for civilians. This creates a brutal internal choice for the Kremlin. Prioritize fuel for the army, risk angering the public and crippling other industrial sectors, or spread the pain and risk slowing down the war effort. The Russian people are now learning the cost of war, not from television screens, but from gas station labels and power outages. The 115 settlements left without electricity in Kursk serve as a frightening preview for the rest of Russia. Targeting power plants and fuel depots in winter conditions is creating a deep sense of panic in Russian society. This panic triggers a spiral that will lead to empty supermarket shelves, a resurgence of the black market, and a decline in the value of the ruble. Beyond all these explosions, burning refineries, and locked airports, what is happening points to a much deeper, almost existential rupture. The tacit social contract Vladimir Putin has had with the Russian people for a quarter of a century has always been based on a simple equation. Give me political obedience, and I will promise you stability, security, and keep war away from your homes. However, with the attacks, this contract was torn up before the eyes of millions of people. That night, Putin's great power narrative collapsed. The people saw that the state had failed to fulfill its most fundamental duty to protect its citizens. Enemy drones flying over the capital, Moscow, shattered the Kremlin's illusion of invincibility. For Russian citizens, war is no longer a special military operation on television, but a reality that could explode outside their windows at any moment. This situation is triggering a dangerous psychological transformation within Russia, namely learned helplessness. From villagers left without electricity in Kursk to elites stranded at Moscow airports, everyone is asking the same question. If the army cannot protect the capital and strategic facilities, who will protect us? This feeling of insecurity is an acid silently eroding the regime's authority. Local telegram channels, despite state media censorship, are overflowing with footage of explosions and angry comments. This is a sign of an uncontrollable flow of information and a wave of mutiny rising from the grassroots. However, the truly devastating blow is being felt beyond the streets, in the gilded halls of the Kremlin and in luxury villas. As of October 2025, elite panic is no longer a theory but has turned into a concrete escape plan. For the oligarchs who control Russia's energy and industrial giants, these attacks mean not only the loss of physical facilities, but also the end of their wealth and immunity. As the refinery in Samara burns and the oil terminal in Krasnodar is halted, the rats are abandoning the ship phase has begun for the oligarchs who are the real owners of these assets. Intelligence reports indicate that Russian generals and economic elites are planning secret asset transfers and escape routes to centers such as Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Putin's promise of wealth in exchange for loyalty becomes increasingly meaningless with every strike by Ukrainian drones on factory chimneys. Strategically, Ukraine's move has also upset the cost balance of the war. Russia is spending millions of dollars on missiles to shoot down plywood drones worth a few thousand. This is an unsustainable economic war. Ukraine has drawn Russia into a war of attrition, forcing it to consume its own resources on its own territory. The targeting of critical production facilities undermines Russia's long-term war capacity. Hitting a tank on the front line is a tactical victory, but hitting the factory that produces that tank's fuel and batteries is a strategic checkmate. Furthermore, these attacks are widening the cracks in Russia's federal structure. The withdrawal of air defense systems from the provinces for Moscow's security is increasing interregional tensions. The governors of Samara or Tatarstan may begin to question the lack of protection from the center. Why is Moscow being protected while our refinery is burning? Is the most dangerous question threatening Russia's internal unity? With these attacks, Ukraine is targeting not only physical targets, but also the political glue that holds the Russian Federation together. Now I can hear the skeptical questions. Is this enough? Can drone attacks really change the course of the war? On their own, perhaps not. A refinery can be repaired. Defenses can be adapted over time. But you must see this not as an independent tactic, but as a masterful part of a much larger strategy. This is a strategy of systemic pressure. The flames rising from the dark and critical facilities that descended on Moscow airports that night symbolize not a temporary crisis, but a lasting strategic defeat. Ukraine has proven that revenge is not a dish best served cold, but an explosive menu served hot from thousands of miles away. Putin's impregnable fortress is now nothing more than a myth. The shutdown of Russian air defenses that night, combined with the fear etched into the Russian people's minds. The state cannot protect us. As billion-dollar industrial facilities were crushed, the Kremlin's lie that everything is under control was also reduced to ashes in those refinery fires. The message now echoes in the streets of Moscow. If there is no safe night for Ukraine, there will be no safe harbor, factory, or capital for Russia. The war has returned to the home of its initiator, and it didn't just knock on the door. It broke it down and entered. So, what are your thoughts on this matter? Share your thoughts in the comments.